The Mayan civilization is located in southeast present-day Mexico, basically all of Guatemala and Belize, and parts of western Honduras and El Salvador. The Mayan culture has its beginnings around 1500 BCE during the pre-classical period. The height of the Mayan civilization is going to be between 600 to 900 CEE. After that, the Mayans will be wiped out by things like earthquakes, natural disasters, pestilence, disease, other invasions from other people, things like that. In the Mayan government, kingship is paternal. It's passed down from father to son. You also see they really focus on the idea of the ruler as a divine, like king of kings. So this idea that he is not only a ruler, but also kind of godlike and goes between the gods and mortals here on earth. So it makes it kind of hard to argue against that type of person. One thing that we can tell from writing and just from other things that we know about the Mayan culture is that the kings were very strong motivators of people. They were able to motivate their people of all sorts of social classes to produce these large public works like the temples we'll see in some pictures coming up without any kind of police force or a large standing army, which basically means that they were able to promote this like amongst the people without force. It is also interesting to note that the Mayans themselves are not considered to be an empire. They are a small civilization that takes up a large part of Central America. They're going to really spread a lot of their ideas to other places in Central America, other cultures, but they are not considered an empire because they're not going out actively like taking over other places and recruiting them into their empire. The Mayans' writing system is one of the things I think they're most well known for and some of the ideas that they came up with. The earliest writing from the Mayans dates back to around 300 BCE, but this actually isn't the oldest writing system in this region, which really goes to show you that with the foundations of civilization and the characteristics of a civilization, writing is something that's going to happen in this region closer to around 3000 BCE. We just may not have a totally written record of it. Unfortunately, most of the books and other writing from the Mayans were actually destroyed by Catholic priests during European colonization, which is really unfortunate because the Mayans, they're going to devise a very complex style of hieroglyphic writing. And as you can see from the pictures, a lot of it involves animals, which is really interesting. And we know that they have over 800 different signs from their writing. Like most other civilizations during this time period, only the upper classes are going to be literate. So very similar to basically every other civilization we've studied so far. The Mayans are probably most famous for their technological advancements. They had several different accomplishments that we'll talk about today. So we'll talk about, they created the first concept of zero. So the idea that there's actually nothing there and creates a number for that, which is pretty interesting. They even do it before the Greeks and the Persians. They're probably most well known for their creation of a very accurate calendar that has its origins in the pre-classical period. They could do things like chart lunar and solar cycles. It's calculated with actually a greater accuracy than the Julian calendar is, which is what the Romans invented, and pretty close to, we use kind of a combination of the Julian and the Mayan calendar today. They also are known for making these very distinct triadic pyramids that can be found in 88 separate locations in the Mayan culture. This indicates massive group cohesion to be able to create these kinds of designs, especially when there was no forced labor units necessarily. So they do have, each temple has 1 to 3 rooms, each dedicated to different deities or deified ancestors. So aka rich people can make their ancestors divine. The Mayans are going to use agricultural techniques like raised fields, terracing. We actually see a lot of signs of them altering their environment, which is going to lead to deforestation later on in their time period. They're going to primarily farm things like maize, beans, cotton, chili peppers, squash. Think Thanksgiving foods. Remember, that all comes from the New World. They have very few domesticated animals in the Americas right now, really only things like the dog and the turkey. They're not going to have any kind of load-bearing animals, which means that they don't really have anything to plow fields other than the people themselves. So you'll see that kind of widespread cash crop agriculture doesn't happen until a little bit later. The only cash crops they're going to be making are things like cotton and cacao. But again, when you're trading that, you can really only carry as much as a single person can carry. The Mayans did engage in some sort of slave trade, usually from conquered peoples. So again, it's not a race thing here. It's more of a we're us and you're not type of thing. They do have a very big, extensive trade network that extends from Mesoamerica all the way to places like New Mexico, or we even have examples of some of their items getting all the way to the East Coast. Like most civilizations, they will trade mostly in prestige, luxury, good items. So again, trade during this time period, it's stimulated by things people want, not necessarily something people need. You see that merchants actually have a pretty high standing in this society. They're often members of nobility, so they kind of create their own middle class almost. So they're usually the sons, like the lower sons, like maybe the fourth or fifth son of some like wealthy person. And again, they're going to be a little bit different in how they trade because of the fact that they don't have any pack animals. There's no horses or oxen or anything that can carry any type of load. So you do see an increase of water routes used in Mesoamerica, so using canoes and other boats to get goods from one place to the other. The Mayans were very religious and believed in a supernatural realm full of powerful deities who needed ceremonial offerings. So this is where they get the idea that they needed to sacrifice things to these deities. They believed also that their ancestors could intervene for their living descendants with supernatural beings. So the idea that, when your grandfather dies, he therefore can be like a spokesperson to this sun god for you. We'll use priests and shamans to run the religion, and really only the elite could be a priest or a shaman. So again, this gives the elite a lot of power because if they're the ones making all of the rules and the law and the religion, they really get to decide what happens. And again, the Mayan ruler is the high priest. They get to decide everything themselves. In Mayan culture, blood is also viewed as a source of nourishment for these deities. So that's what really stems a lot of these human sacrifices, or animal sacrifices primarily, because they see it as necessary. And usually when they would sacrifice people, they wouldn't use people from their own society. They would actually use high status prisoners from other societies. Insufficient food supply, things like earthquakes, invasions by outsiders, internal rebellion, a combination of all these factors is really what is suggested as the possible cause for the Mayan civilization falling. They're kind of like the Roman Empire in the fact that there's not just one main cause, it's several different things combined into one. So what appears to be certain for sure is that around 900 CEE, the Mayans will really start to fall and their cities will be abandoned.